Welcome to the Central States Lawmen and Outlaws Historic Association. And this is part 2 of my interview with Rod Stanley, a local expert from Dexter, Iowa, on the Bonnie and Clyde shootout at Dexfield Park in 1933.
You pulled all this together. This is all your. The people that used to live out at the site, and their basement was full. I mean, they were Bonnie and Clyde people. They were into it, and this is all the pictures that they had on their walls down there. And then when they moved from the house, they contacted me again. They said, "Do you want these for the museum?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I do." I said, "You've got quite a collection of stuff."
Is this Bonnie?
Yep, that is Bonnie. Down in Arcadia, Louisiana, where they took the bodies.
Yeah, and they shot the hell out of them.
Yeah, I think one was 23 bullets and the other was 26.
Yeah.
But these are the places. This was right across the street. This grocery store and restaurant, Bloom's. And that's where Clyde got most of his when they were staying out at the park. He would. And usually Bonnie would come with him from eyewitness. The people in Dexter saw a woman in the car. And they saw Clyde. But they weren't concerned about it because there was always, because of Highway 6, there was there was people that were strangers that were always coming into town. And they didn't think much about it except...
Yeah, it wasn't out of the norm.
No, but the only thing they thought was strange was whoever this stranger was never pulled frontwards into a parking space. He'd always back into the parking space and leave the engine running.
Yeah.
And Bonnie was always in the car. Yeah. She never, none of these places, these stores.
In case they had to leave in a hurry.
Yeah. But people also walked close enough to the car to see the bullet holes in the car that Clyde had filled up with mud, too.
Oh, okay.
That happened when they were coming up from the Platte City thing. They stopped. It was north of Mount Air. I was talking to a lady once, and her family lived in that area about where they came through, and they found a box full of bloody bandages and so on down near this creek where this creek bed was at. But Clyde took mud from a creek and put the mud in the bullet holes to make them less noticeable. And the people in Dexter saw that. But anyway, they would go to this grocery store across the street, and it was a restaurant, and Clyde would buy 5 takeout meals. And 5 takeouts, and that meant they had the real plates, real silverware, all that stuff, and they gave them to him, and then they'd take the food, mostly the steak and chicken, the most expensive stuff. That was one thing that Clyde had money, and he was spending it, and that's the reason why I think a lot of the Dexter people didn't ask questions. Because if during the Depression you weren't going to turn down cash, even though
absolutely,
even though it wasn't his cash, but he was spending it.
Yeah,
But and then there was another restaurant in Dexter, and I don't have a picture of it. It was called the Myers Restaurant. It was on the corner on Main Street. And I guess he went into there a couple times as well and bought food there. This clothing store, he went in there, and John Love was the clerk in the store. The town constable was the clerk in this clothing store. And Clyde went in there, and John Love, when I was growing up, and he had his shop, he had a shoe shop, which he repaired shoes. When I do the program, if I have younger people, they're saying repairing shoes. Well, I mean, what the hell? back in my day, if you bought a pair of shoes, like in the springtime of the year, like Mom would do, and they still fit.
Yeah.
I mean, if you lost the heel on it or a hole in the sole,
you got it resoled.
That's right. Mom said, "Go up and see John," and he'd put it on for like 50 cents or something instead of paying $3 or $4. But anyway, John Love was the clerk in this store, Myron Williams clothing store. And the story that John told was that he said this small, slight guy with a southern drawl came in, and Clyde was 5'7", 135 pounds. Bonnie Parker was 4'9",
Wow,
like 95.
Tiny.
Tiny
people.
Well, that's them. That's actual size. That poster over there. That's actual size poster.
Oh, that's actual size.
That's actual size. But anyway, John.
Well, people were smaller back then.
They were.
Yeah, they were definitely smaller.
John said this guy sauntered in and came up to the counter and John asked him what he wanted and this guy said, I'm going to buy some shirts. I said, I want some shirts. And John said, I have 4 different kinds. He said, really good ones and all down to what maybe you can afford. But Clyde, of course, Clyde was in a suit. I mean, he was well dressed, and they always were. They had good clothes, but maybe this will mean something to you. A lot of times when I do this in the program, people just look at me. But Clyde said, I want Arrow.
Yeah.
I want Arrow shirts.
Yes.
And John looked at him and said, those are $1.25 a piece, buddy. And Clyde
Those
said,
are an expensive shirt.
Clyde said, I don't care. I said, I got them. I tell people, and this is the truth, I only had 1 Arrow shirt in my whole.
Me too. I had 1 Arrow shirt. My whole life, I had one. Yeah.
I had 1 Arrow shirt that I bought in Adel, Iowa, and that was for a special occasion, for a prom or something, you know. And Clyde says, I need size 14 regular. So John got the shirts. And I think he bought like a pair of shoes and a belt and maybe a pair of pants while he was there. Had all this stuff on the counter. John says, you want me to wrap that up for you? And Clyde said, that'd be nice. And John turned around, and he always carried his badge and his gun on his left hip. Turned around, Clyde must have saw that. Because John said, this guy's disposition changed. Boom. Like, I'm not friendly with you anymore because you're a cop. Yeah. And he said, just give me my stuff. John asked him when to wrap it up, and Clyde said, yeah, wrap it up for me. He said, give me my stuff.
Not after that.
No. He was out. And he put the money down, and out the door he went. And John thought, God, what'd I do?
Yeah, yeah.
And he didn't.
It scared him.
He didn't even know that he was Clyde Rowell.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the most wanted people at that time. In the Midwest.
He was on the list.
And the thing of it is, though, and I say this in programs.
Him and John.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you this. I mean, I remember going in the post office, and they had all the wanted posters up there. And I remember my buddies and I would go in there, and we'd look at those wanted posters and look at these guys and say, why in the hell would they want to come to Dexter?
Right.
Right. I mean, why would these people show? Why would they want to show up in Dexter?
Yeah.
And that, but anyway.
To hide.
Yeah. But he bought clothes there. He bought drugs. Most of the drugs and like the bandages, the peroxide, the aspirin, all that stuff. And that store's still there, but it's a piece of shit now. It's gone to nothing. Because the rest of that owner owns it now, and he's throwing shit and stuff in there. But the Poli drug store and Clyde tried to buy morphine from them. He told the Polis that he was a veterinarian, and the Poli said, "Show me the proof." Yeah. And Clyde couldn't do it, so they wouldn't sell him any hard stuff. But he did buy. He did not buy all the bandages and aspirin and peroxide. This was the other drugstore in town that Clyde bought some stuff there at the Stanley. No relation to me. Different clan. The guy Stanley was one of the first merchants, and his son was actually running it in the 30s. Old Bill might have still been alive, but that was where the post office is at now. Is where that was. But they made lots of trips into Dexter. One of my friends, she was 14 years old. She's gone now. The sad thing about it, when I was growing up in Dexter, none of us gave a shit about Bonnie Clyde. In fact, I never heard anybody ever mention.
Never even heard of it.
Never even heard of it. And all these people that I talk about in my program, I mean, I didn't talk to, there was a couple of them, Marvell Feller, I got to talk to Marvell, and maybe a couple other ones, but everybody else was dead. I mean, they all died. And they took their stories with them, Sure. And that's the sad thing about all this, but but no.
Well, it looks like a lot of things were caught along the way, though.
But while they were out there, they needed another car. The car that they had up from Platte City, they wanted a backup car because Buck took up the whole back seat of the car. So they made a trip to Perry, Iowa, and drove around Perry looking for a car. And I think it was on 6th Street. There was a family, the Stoner family. There was a guy by the name of Ed Stoner, and he had just bought a 33 Ford. Of course, Clyde loved Fords. He loved Fords because of the Flathead 8, the V8 engine.
Yeah.
It would go 80 miles. It would go 80 miles an hour, just like he liked. He was always looking for the edge.
Yeah.
The Browning automatic rifles was an edge on the law. The 80-mile-an-hour car was an edge over the police because somebody like John Love, did John Love have a car that could go 80 miles an hour?
No.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably maybe 40 or 50,
right.
you know? But anyway, there was Ed Stoner was visiting his dad, and he pulled into the drive, and Bonnie and Clyde, W.D. Jones came by, saw this car, W.D. Jones got out of it. And I talked to the people up in Perry that knew Ed Stoner, and they told me the story that I figured he'd have to hotwire it or he'd have to do something to get the car going. But Ed Stoner was there. He was going in for only a little bit, left the car running in the driveway. So WD jumped in it, and away he went. And Ed Stoner and his brother chased him on foot for a ways, and obviously didn't catch him. But that supposedly is a
That's what you call really bad timing.
It was bad timing.
Really bad timing.
Bad timing on the Stoners, but
Right.
then basically, I mean, they got their second car then, and that car, of course, was out there at the shootout. Clyde loved the Ford so much, he supposedly wrote that letter. Henry Ford.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Henry Ford, he wrote a letter.
telling him how great his cars are.
There you go. He did. In fact, yeah, he says, "Why I still have breath left in my lungs." I just want to tell you, this is a summary of basically how.
Best getaway car.
Yeah. He said your car is one of the best performing. Don't have back that much service, and he says if I ever get an opportunity to steal a car, I hope it's one of yours. So they said in there. But okay, I'm gonna burst the bubble here. It bursted my bubble because I'm friends with Buddy Barrow.
Yeah.
Buddy's the nephew of Clyde Barrow, and he lives in Dallas. And Buddy's been to several of my. He's come up to Dexter and visited the museum, sat on one of my programs, and this and that and so on. And telling him about this letter, he says, "Oh yeah," he says, "I've seen that letter." And I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he says, "It's a fake." And he says, "You know why it's a fake?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Look at how he signed the letter."
Yeah.
He said, "It says Clyde Champion Barrow." And he says, "You know what Clyde's middle name was?" And I said, "Yeah, Chestnut."
Yeah.
Chestnut, and that's his
Chestnut,
that's his middle name. And he said Clyde would never sign. He wouldn't sign unless it was his real name. He says he signed it as Champion, and he says that's not Clyde Barrow. He says, "You can believe what you want." He says, "I think it's a fake."
Yeah.
Because, okay, then did a little research. This guy, Johnny Dillinger, I found a letter written just like that, just about like that.
Yeah.
That's
Same handwriting?
pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
But